Okay. Time to go ahead and bite the bullet here and discuss everything that's happened because of JJ and Alex Kurtzman. Now, let's rewind a little bit here. Now, remember in the aftermath of Nemesis basically taking a big dump. The Parlance isn't ever opened. There was no... It lost out to a Jennifer Lopez romantic comedy. Everyone else had moved. All the other blockbusters, Harry Potter, and anything else was out of the way. They didn't want to get beaten by Star Trek, and again, even Star Trek V won the weekend. They all got out of the way. And then the date comes and it loses. It only took in like 19 million opening weekend. That would have been pathetic even during the motion pictures time back in 79. And when Nemesis came out, that was pathetic. It literally lost out to Jennifer Lopez, Made in Manhattan. And then of course the thing is there was not good buzz about this movie anyway. The cast was not very quiet about of how displeased they were with the way Stuart Baird was directing there. LeVar Burton getting with how he kept calling him an alien, but I'm not an alien. It's just, and I think Marina was probably ticked off about the stuff they were making her do, and it was not a happy set. They made them clear they weren't happy. The buzz was not good coming out of this thing. It's like, this doesn't sound good. And plus, again, the fan base was irritated about the way they were being kind of taken for granted regarding Enterprise at that time. And some rather dismissive comments. Joe Monosky described it as like bugs on the windshield of Voyager. It was weird. I'm not sure. I have to check the dates, but they were not happy. Okay. So I have to check to see if it was Voyager or Enterprise going at the time. But either way, it was not going well in Star Trek land at that time. The fans were being felt left out. The ratings were not very great. They weren't paying attention to things. So, okay, let's give you something you will pay attention to, and basically not show up for Nemesis opening. And then word got around that the movie sucked anyway. So it wasn't like Galaxy Quest, where it lousy opening, but it eventually took off when word got around. Hey, this is a good movie. Go see it. Nemesis, it's like nobody showed up, and those that did show up, don't bother. It sucks, and it just died right there. And that's the environment they were looking into in there. So Nemesis does a belly flop at the box office. Meanwhile, on the TV front, Enterprise, just as it's starting to find its footing, when you bring in Mike Sussman, David Goodman, and they start, then the wrapping up everything that had been left with them at season 3, and finally hitting the big red reset button on the temporal Cold War. Okay, that's it. We're done. We're going to start treating this as a proper prequel now, and they've got some of the best episodes of the entire show out of that. In fact, in the prep work for the final edition of the Concordance, pretty much all of season 4 is in there. Okay. There's like one episode left out of season 4 that would make it into the Concordance because it refers directly to original series canon. And just as coming in, that's also when the switchover is happening between UPN when the UPN and CW or WB, they're being merged in the CW, and Les Moonves famously does not like science fiction, particularly hates Star Trek for some strange reason. He tried to just pull the plug at the end of season 3. But Karen McCluggage was still hanging on there. At least give him one more year to wrap it up and maybe get something taken off here. So they got that last season to wrap things up pretty much. And again, try and prove this. And essentially they did. Jeff Combs had convinced it. This should have been the first season. What they were doing in the fourth season. But that was a case of they would have had to have blown away every network on the thing to get Moonves' attention, because he was determined this show dies. As soon as they finish over, that's it. They're dead, because he wanted it gone. He'd no clue about science fiction. In fact, he went with a family to go see The Phantom Menace, and was irritated at that. Don't we own this? Don't they owe us something? No. That's Star Wars. That's Fox. That's not us. Okay, they had to explain it to him. But that was the case of it was doing good. The ratings were not that bad overall, considering the rest of the series. They weren't doing that bad. And any other fair thing, they would have gotten a 5th season at least. No, Moonves would have canceled it regardless. But then time goes on a bit, and the merchandise is still moving. Fans are still going, and they're still claiming, "Hey, when do we get more Star Trek? When do we get more Star Trek?" It's like, okay, fine, So, but he's not bringing back the guys who actually know how to make it. I think Rick Berman was essentially retired anyway at this point. And a Paramount, again, this is also when they split when Sumner Redstone had his brainstorm. Apparently Sumner Redstone never saw King Lear. With the perils of splitting your kingdom amongst your heirs, like it doesn't end well. And so and on paper, look, and it's okay. The TV side, all the they go to CBS. The movie properties, they go to Paramount. The problem is when you got some of these things that straddle. Stuff like Mission Impossible and Star Trek especially. Mission Impossible was pretty much an exclusively movie property by that point, so it wasn't a big a deal. Nobody was bringing it back on TV. Star Trek is another matter. And so the way the rights came out is Star Trek only had rights to the Star Trek movies. They couldn't really claim anything for the TV series so much. And if it didn't show up in a movie, they couldn't do anything with it. And so either they could, do remakes of the first, 10 movies, or if they had to do something different, they had to, play around a bit. And I think there's also a matter of a lot have been made of the 20% or 25% different or something. It has to be it, and I think that was misinterpreted when they started coming to the JJ stuff and why things had to be so different. I don't think it was so much they had to be that different. It's that they had to be that different in order for JJ to lay claim to the merchandising for that thing. But we'll get to that in a minute. So basically, Moonves is being pressed. Okay, we got to do something. It's a value of our property, whether you like it or not. Doesn't matter. You hate it. It makes money. People want to buy more of it. We need to make more of it. And so fine, bring it. Start taking pictures. What do you want to do with the Star Trek thing? And somehow, Wunderkind J.J. Abrams, he was all the big thing with Lost and Fringe and other things. The second he uttered the words, "I was never a Star Trek fan," that should have been, okay, well, thank you for coming in. But no. He's a film by J.J. Abrams. Was kind of quite, it's like, hey, let's bring, So you got the gig. And with them came some of his lackeys, Alex Kurtzman and Roberto Orci. Now, Orci was the Star Trek fan of the bunch. I disagreed, no longer with us, but I disagreed with his interpretations, but there's no question. No, he was a fan. He did know some of his stuff and had some ideas to go with it. But Kurtzman was like he was like Abrams. He wasn't a fan. His friends were fans. He'd go over to the house and it was on. He never actually sought it out to watch it. And JJ's guy said, it was too talky, So that's called plot and exposition and fucking writing. Okay. And JJ is a Star Wars guy. He wanted to be bang, shoot, man. That's what he started, and that's his idea. When he, his idea for a new Star Trek thing, make it more like Star Wars. Movies didn't know diddly squat about either one. All I knew was we could see the trades. Star Wars was making, even the freaking prequel, even the sequel stuff was making, making money. At least at first. I think Phantom Menace made about $2 billion or something like that. So like, well, all right, he knows his stuff. Let him do. And then threw tons of money at it because someone said, "Hey, we got a thing, we could, make that kind of Marvel, MCU money." No, you can't. We all love Star Trek. It is a beautiful lady, but it's not that kind of a franchise. It's always been a niche within a niche, okay? The whole reason there were Star Trek conventions in the first place is because they were tired of all these little Trekkies getting on their foot on the old line Star Trek, in the old line science fiction conventions. Worldcon and stuff like that. It's like, all these little Trekkies, go, wait, do your thing. Okay, fine, we will. And that's where the Star Trek conventions started kicking in the 70s. Because science fiction conventions go back to the 30s and 40s, okay? Forey Ackerman was the first one to show up in a costume back in like 1940. Okay, so, but they threw tons of money at it and made it all big and flashy and rapid cuts and everything. And at this point, yeah, of course it hit big. It had been 2009 when that movie came out, and Nemesis was like bunch of years earlier, so they could have put the cast on stage reading the phone book and they would have got a big opening, just out of curiosity. And actually, I'm gonna to pull up the chart. I'm gonna need to fix that chart actually because I got a typo in one of the things. But the box office adjusted for inflation. And I think about, look at the money you're making this. Where I slap back at John Campy a few times. Look how much more money you made. No, it didn't make that much money. That's why you have to adjust for inflation. You have to, because that is where you translate into butts in seats. You can't look at the dollar amounts because, again, a ticket in 1979 was like $3.50 for a nighttime showing, compared to 2009 where it was like about 3 times. It was like at least $9, $9-10 to get into a night evening showing. So and then you adjust for inflation. It's about the same. It's like they really did. You didn't get that many more people watching the JJ's movies you did the first movie. And the JJ came out in 3 times as many screens as the motion picture did. And so you needed that much more to make just that much more exposure to get just a little bit more money, really. Not a good thing. And again, as expensive as those movies were, you really can't argue that they really made money at the box office because the overhead, again, you got to figure to break even. It used to be like 2 times the production budget because the theaters get half, and you got to figure in promotional costs and the costs of running off the prints and sending them all out. So now it's like more like 3 times the production budget before you actually do $1 in profit in any movie. But JJ comes back, makes a big splash. And some the usual folks who like the big splashy, flashy movies, yeah, they loved it. But some of those old guards, like, this is not Star Trek. I mean, they will let it go for the most part because they did acknowledge it was an alternate timeline, but that doesn't mean we gotta like it. It's like, it was okay. It's like, maybe if you took the Star Trek name off it and just made general science fiction movie in space doing spacey things, it's still stupid. The logic doesn't hold up very well, okay? It's still a dumb movie. And then, but they get to go ahead and make a mother because they see the dog. Oh, look, Star Trek is cool again. So they make, Into Darkness. And again, there's like 4 years, I think, before it was an extended period before they got from that one. So some of the enthusiasm had died off. But also, they did some unforced errors in that there have been a poll or two, before it came out. Main thing, what shouldn't they do? What do you not want them to do in the next, movie from J.J. Abrams? And the number one thing to not do was to try and remake Wrath of Khan. What did they do? They took a stab at remaking Wrath of Khan. It was going to be Benicio del Toro playing Harrison. So the reveal of my name is Khan, it wouldn't have been quite, but also things like Benicio del Toro. He's no Ricardo Montalban. I think for that, if they could have gotten Antonio Banderas, I think it would have been a better match. And I think if they threw a few zeros on that, they would have done that as a tribute to Ricardo Montalban, because all the stuff they did with Spy Kids. But you get Benedict Cumberbatch, who looks about as much like as a Sikh as I do. Okay. And it's just like, no, it doesn't work, okay? Because they also missed the point of the reason why Wrath of Khan worked is because you had that backstory of Space Seed and all the years in between, and the fact that was Kirk and Spock that have been friends for God knows how long in Wrath of Khan with that thing, and then they barely know each other, really. Barely tolerate each other in this universe. Swapping the who dies doesn't work. And you still got, Zachary Quinto losing his cool again. He went full goose bozo violent nut job in the '09 movie, and he goes full goose bozo nut job in this one when he's trying to beat the living crap out of Khan. And it's like there was a one of the cinema sins thing took on my name is Khan. It's like, surprise, but only if you're 9. It's like, And while, it did well at the box office, it didn't hold up well. It pissed off a lot of people. And that rebounded onto when Star Trek Beyond came out. Again, an exceptionally long time between the movies, so there goes any goodwill that was still left over. And that also gets enabled the bad will from In the Darkness to build up. So by the time you get Beyond in there, with one of the Fast and Furious directors, Franklin, Lynn, is the last name. Now in the case of this, better be a damn good movie, but then it just domestic box office, it just flopped. There's no white, it just died right there at the box office. It might have the overseas kind of balanced things out again, but yeah, the overseas, they don't give a crap. It's a big flashy space movie, they'll go for a big flashy space movie, but there's nothing to build upon with that. But that brought, it just laid there and died. And people saying, oh, it's most like the original. No, it wasn't. I saw enough clips of it. No, that wasn't the original. This thing was just as dumb as the rest of them. Okay? So I don't know where these guys are getting. That's more of the spirit of the original. When was the last time you watched the original? Okay? Because I'm not getting any of that crap. No, there's nothing original about it. It was stupid. That space station, that's drop and remember, but they're just pulling names out the thing. It's supposed to be a reference because the original name of the Enterprise in the first pitch was the Yorktown. So they named the station Yorktown. That makes no sense, okay? That makes no sense to name a space station without Yorktown. You can follow a ship name where you're following the presence of other ships in history named Yorktown. A space station? No. You're just pulling names off of memory alpha because someone will like this. It's the same with in the '09 movie when you name it Delta Vega. It's like, that has nothing to do with Delta Vega. Delta Vega was clear on the edge of the galaxy and it was a desert planet. This is Hoth. Like Tom Hanks' name, he was talking about when Kirk goes up on ice planet Hoth. The only thing, improvement with the Into Darkness is the new Enterprise was just, less gangly and a little more better proportioned. But other than that, forget it. It was still dumb. And another thing, they're really building this fetish of just ripping the Enterprise apart film after film. Every movie, they beat the living crap out of that ship. It's like first time there's an end, because that's the, again, granted there weren't 2 bolts left of the original ship, like I said in Starlog. So I think, why are we weeping over that? The rest of it's probably still at the Fleet Museum. But it was essentially the original ship going up in flames. That one hit. The Enterprise D goes down. It still sucks, and it's been redeemed with season 3 of Picard, which I'll get to. But it's still it. This one's like, we barely get to know this misshapen piece of crap, and you rip it apart every chance you get. It's like, what are you trying to prove here? Unless by now everything's CGI. So there's no question of how did they do that. That's one thing, but effect sequences back in the day, how did they? It's the thing. How did they do these shots? I mean, when you see the Enterprise blow up in the Search for Spock, you see things going, ripping, melting away the melter. How did they do that? That's part of the fascination with it, because it's a physical model being done here, and flames are going. CGI, They could make it flash a light and it turns into a big purple dragon, and it's the same difference. Not about that much impact. It's like, who cares? But that was the end of the thing. And as recent news have come out, that's the end of the Kelvin timeline. There will be no 4. There will be no 4th movie in that timeline, because Star Trek, because Paramount has now under new management, who have a little better clue as to what's going on with it and what they want to do with Star Trek. They do not, David Ellison has had experience dealing with Alex Kurtzman during making of Into Darkness and Beyond, and was not impressed. So yeah, you're not doing anymore. That's the bad robot era is over. So let's transition back over to the TV side, when it was time to do a new series. And again, Moonves has been pushed on various sides. We want a new Star Trek series. We want a new series. Okay, so they start taking pitches. One of them is from Seth MacFarlane. Presumably, it was just what would end up as the Orville. And I don't know if maybe part, you mentioned that part of it was going to be bringing back some of the old experienced Star Trek crew who knew how to make this stuff. We're not doing it. Just flew along. And so Seth goes back over to Fox and says, hey, want to take on Paramount? And you get the Orville. But Bryan Singer somehow manages to think, okay, this is how to do it. And he had, he was on, Voyager and Enterprise. He had credentials. And he was working with this prequel idea. Actually, we originally wanted to do an anthology. Discovery is just going to be one part of it. There's going to be, occasionally Klingon story or various jump around the timeline type of thing. That one was shut down. Eventually, they settled on just Discovery. And he trotted out that old Ralph McQuarrie design. And this is going to be set just, before the original series type thing. But it's like, something that's pointed out to me that Brian Fuller was no friend to canon. And this kind of came up during discussions on Enterprise, when he would, they were going to decide what the insignia for the Defiant was. And he was pushing, no, it's the same as everyone else. And no, Brian, it's not. The Constellation's got its own insignia, and other, we've seen and the Exeter had its own insignia. So no, not everyone was wearing the Delta. Okay. It's like where it shows up, that's your production mistake. Okay. But when they had the money to spend for, and again, people cite this memo from Bob Justman where he's raising all holy hell. How dare they? Everyone. It's like he signed it Grand Inquisitor. Okay, so this is not a this is a Bob Justman memo. Not the most serious thing in the world. Not one you want to take to the bank, really. Okay? And also remember, Bob Justman was the money guy on the set. He had to approve the expenditures, including expenditures for new insignia. Okay? He had to, this stuff came through. So no, he was not shocked and appalled when suddenly Captain Tracy walks on board with a whole new insignia here. And that one, they had to do a few, because you had at least one engineering uniform with an insignia, and the chief surgeon who sprawled out on the bridge, he got an insignia. They had to make at least 3 insignia for the Exeter, and that is a little more in keeping with military protocol. So you make it very easy to identify. Okay, he's with the Exeter, he's with the Constellation, he's with the that sort of thing. Because modern uniform, in modern day militaries, you got unit insignias. And that's also pretty much confirmed in the novelization of the motion picture. It was confirmed in Roddenberry saying that the Enterprise insignia was made the one insignia for the entire fleet with the com badge stuff. Well, now we can't, but everyone had now. So that settled that. But it also infers by going back that before everyone did have different insignia. And the fact that, people from Starfleet Command had a Starburst pin. Okay? Yeah, there were different insignia for different assignments. Fuller fought against that. He was overruled by everyone else. So. But that was just one sample. Like, he was not a friend of canon. So what his final idea would look like, God only knows. I understand they weren't going to be those marching band uniforms, but they weren't going to be pilot era either. The fact that you trotted out that design for the Discovery at the same time, essentially as between the cage and where no man has gone before, it's like, you're really not trying very hard, Brian. But also certainly, no, they basically took his concept and threw him in the trash, because there was a tardigrade, but as a member of the crew. It was a totally different thing. The Mycelial Network was what the Mycelial Network is in reality. It's a subterranean thing for, where fungi are able to connect. It's not an interstellar pathway equivalent of the infinite improbability drive, where you hit the switch and you're everywhere in the universe at once. And you decide where you're going to come off when you turn the switch off. That wasn't it. So Kurtzman took Fuller's original idea, good or bad, and made total hash out of it. But we get Discovery. That's going to be. It was supposed to launch CBS All Access streaming service, but delay upon delay and everything else. Part of it was Brian Fuller. He wanted to wait until Sonequa Martin Green was available. At that time she was still on The Walking Dead. So they had to wait until they killed off her character, and she had her final thing before she was available to come over there. So they kept delaying production, and that finally got to Moonves. No, that's it. We're handed to Kirshner. Now, Sonequa Martin Green is currently on the show Boston Blue. It's a spinoff from Blue Bloods. And from what Steph says, she's actually pretty good. Which kind of tells me that certain actors, they're okay if you give them good material. But if you give them crap, their performance is crap. They don't have the ability to rise up. Not many actors do. Not many can turn crappy material into something good. They're stuck with what they got. And Sonequa Martin Green she's not really, she's fine as a supporting character, not as a lead. And that was a mistake there. You got to know the difference between who can carry a series and who's just very good support. But we suffered through this. They spent they're just spending like it was going out of style on these shows. Sets that were far too elaborate for what they needed. And considering they weren't lit worth shit, so why are you spending? You can't see the sets anyway, so why are you spending so damn much? in these dark uniforms and everything. It's like, and it was all, and it was also a thing of like, where he started, me and Robert, that now it's like, started, Star Trek used to, it wanted you to think, it didn't tell you how to think. Until now. Now the enlightened ones are in charge, and they're going to really push the agenda and the message, And it's all about feelings and crying on a bridge and things. It's like, the hell with a good story, And identity politics front and center and left and right and up and down, and you can't get away. It's like the only, real endangered species on any of these shows was, being a white straight male. If it had been anybody except Christopher Pike showing up, he'd have been dead within 10 minutes. We know the guy he brought with him died really quickly. Like start of season 2. And how they got Akiva Goldsman on there, he was sold a line that he wanted to do a Captain Pike series. And he was rather irritated that wasn't what he got when he signed on to Discovery. But they got him on there, and they start. Look, we got the original uniforms. Like, no, that's not. That's just the same marching band uniform. We just color them differently. It's still completely wrong. But yeah, when Pike and his team shows up on Discovery to take command for a while. And he shows up with some lady engineer and some guy in a blue shirt. Mikey Burnham's expecting Spock. No, Spock is missing right now. We got some other schlub here. And first thing flying out, Mikey Spock, who knows everything and even test flew these little pods they're flying in. Amongst everything else, when the hell she had time to do all this before, God only knows. But she's the bestest at everything. You've got accusation of being a Mary Sue. This is the Mary Sue in action. Was Michael Burnham. Someone didn't get the memo that this is not the kind of character people. This is the kind of people made readers made fun of back in the 70s. But this guy, they're flying out, and she's, don't do that. All right, no, and I think I literally did the 3, 2, 1, smacked into an asteroid. He went black. He went blowy. But it just went through a few things. How many times can we see Michael Burnham cry on the bridge or on screen or whatever? And it's just, it was ridiculous. It was like, I don't even want to call it a parodyist. It was just a bad version of people. It was. Star Trek Discovery was basically Star Trek written by non-fans for non-fans. Because anybody with a hardcore fan, really with any sense of, how can you be a self-respecting fan and watch this stuff where they're basically insulting you episode after episode? And the real insult, at least with JJ's films, they were acknowledged to be in an alternate timeline. Discovery is supposed to be in the main timeline between the cage and where no man has gone before. And there's no way you can look at that stuff and say, no, this doesn't fit any way whatsoever. And I think they made it abundantly clear in the one episode where they went back to Talos 4. And someone had the bright idea to previously on Star Trek, and they showed clips from the cage with the Enterprise and Jeffrey Hunter as and Leonard Nimoy and those, and you're going right into the episode and you expect us to believe this is the same bunch with the same ship. You're high. I think the only thing that show really worked is you have no concept of, these people. It's like, why is canon so important? Without canon, your show has no internal integrity. It might as well be South Park, because it's just basically, canon's the fancy word of saying you're being consistent with your backstory. And when you don't have that, then you really can't, expect anybody to take you seriously at that point. And I point you again back to those books on the bookshelf back here, and some of the ones over here. A lot of us over here invested a lot of time and energy and money in keeping track of this stuff. And once upon a time, you could do that. When David Kimball did his, breakaway, or cutaway view of the Enterprise poster for the motion picture, it said, okay, yeah, this is how it works. There go the shafts go this way. There's the bridge. There's there's sick bay. There's the shuttle bay and everything else, and you could do that sort of thing with the original show. I pity anyone trying to do a cutaway diagram of the Discovery. Especially once they did that thing with the inside, the turbo system. What? You just turned the ship into the TARDIS. Like outside that turbolift car, it's a vast, pocket universe of everything. Do you have any fucking clue how the turbo shaft system works? Do you care? Clearly not. And again, when they start doing this stuff, it's impossible to be a self-respecting viewer and respect any of this crap. But it goes along. Somehow they keep pushing it through on spite, because the numbers were not good. They were not getting good viewer numbers, even on CBS All Access. The only reason I think they ran it on CBS itself that first season is you gotta fill time. And they figured, well, this is as good a thing as any. No one's watching this, and the ratings were literally maybe 1 million viewers averaging on it. It was pathetic. Shows have been canceled with better ratings than this thing got. But they're going along. They're just cranking out. And a lot of us in the time were, this show's got to be canceled. This is ridiculous. Why is this show still going? Nobody's watching. And the factor was that the world of television had changed because of streaming. They no longer cared about Nielsen ratings. They would just put out content for the streaming service. Someone's going to watch it eventually, so they just cranking out material to fill the thing. But thing is, while the older series, this is also across the board, older shows in general get better ratings on now Paramount Plus, but back in CBS All Access, old episodes of Star Trek. Discovery was not getting the views. Nobody cared. And this also goes back, when JJ tried to get CBS to stop all merchandising connected to the original series. So they would have the merchandising thing all to himself. Wisely, they told him to go fuck himself. Because they're still pulling in some decent money at the time from original merchandising. And the fact that so much of merchandising for the JJ Trek movies went straight to the clearance pegs. The only thing that sold well for the merchandising in the JJ Trek movies was the Enterprise and the Phaser. Everything else, it was collecting dust on a clearance rack. And why? Because people like ships and people like guns. Okay? But the rest of them are like, no, these characters. And frankly, whoever was running Playmates at the time, they forgot how to make figures. The figures they're putting out, at that point, compared to what they're doing in the 90s, sucked. And even when they re-released stuff like, Kirk, Spock, and Khan, those things, they were horrible. They put up these very same figures back in the 90s. They couldn't just break out them. No, they had to change, and they sucked. And again, I saw those on something I thought I'd never see. Star Trek figures on the clearance rack at Walmart. You never see Star Trek stuff on a clearance rack, but this time they did. But yeah, Discovery doing this long, meandering I think a lot of it's also that's we all keep hearing about the contract that Les Moonves signed with Alex Kurtzman and his team. And we keep wondering what the hell is going on. And eventually we kind of figure it out through this. All right. Because the second they got 5 years in on Discovery, because by this point Les Moonves is gone. He got Me Too'd. And everyone's realizing these idiots are bleeding us dry. We are spending money hand over fist on these idiotic shows. They're losing us money. No one's watching it. Nobody wants them. We're getting calls all the time from fans wanting Alex Kurtzman's head on a bike outside the studio. So yeah, first chance they got, Discovery's gone. Okay. Which surprised the hell out of everyone, because everyone, what? They don't, because again, apparently everyone on staff, everyone loves you. They'll love the show, but no, and figured they'd get 7, at least 7 seasons. Nope, you're done. So Discovery got the thing pulled out from under him, and the reason we didn't get a Section 31 series, or Akiva Goldsman kind of undercut Kurtzman, and I'll give him credit for this one, to do a Captain Pike show that he won the first place. Again, that Oscar has a lot of clout, so he managed to do an end run and get Strange New Worlds approved. But in the case of how clueless they were going to call it Star Trek Enterprise until someone pointed out, no, that name has been taken, and we're still selling DVD sets of that show. Find something else. So then, which brings us to this little jewel here. Now, as opposed to the standard Discovery designs of ships, which I'll get to Picard in a minute, but where they're clearly made to be easily rendered in the computer, no curves, no all sharp angles, and looking like you could have made the thing out of folded cardboard. This one was actually one of John E's proposals for the NX-01 for Enterprise. And it was rejected for, because it looked too much like Kirk ships, like a Dragon. And some back channels got the Coke's Doug Drexler, who had already moved on to Foundation Imaging by this point in Enterprise. And they, can you come back and give Doug a chance to design the new Enterprise? Which he actually was doing, because he was, he liked the Foundation. He had to give them 2 weeks warning. Oh yeah, great. What time you get off? So he's doing a lot of work at home with Herman Zimmerman on the side while those 2 weeks ran out, and then jump all the way full time. But I give this credit for it's a lovely John Eves design. It is not the Enterprise though. There's a lot of callbacks to the NX design. And because of that, and it's like, and they grossly outgoes the size of this thing. This thing's the size of a Galaxy-class starship, practically. And it's like, no. In my little headcanon, I shrink this down. I call it the Yorktown class. It's just before the AMT one. This thing comes up at the same size, same scale, roughly. I figured this is the first Federation design, right off the bat, when the Federation's first formed. And then you get this one, and and then the Constitution class. But that's a side issue. So we get Strange New Worlds. And people say, oh, it's so much better. Well, they were forced into episodic television. You need to wrap this up. You can't have a big, long, meandering storyline that will figure out where we get to when we get there. That's more than with Discovery. They serialized story, and they just dragged it out and kept on going. And nobody cared after about the first 5 episodes anyway. So it's going somewhere. Nobody cares. You got character. They can't name. I mean, the only bridge crew member that sticks to mind is Kayla Detmer. And that's only because, Emily Kuntz, it's like, this is someone you should do something. There's something in her. She's got to, and when they finally get something to do, she can deliver. She's the only memorable member of that bridge crew. The whole thing, They could have done stuff with her, but they, totally, and that was wasted opportunity. And that's something with Discovery. The one time the episode was actually interesting, when Michael Burnham was gone, and the rest of the crew had to suddenly step up and do their jobs. Because prior to that, Michael Burnham's doing everything. I mean, literally, she's pushing crew out of their way and doing their jobs for them. They just stand, oh, Michael, you're so great. You're the bestest ever. What would we ever do without you? In fact, they actually followed her into the far future. Fuck their lives. Fuck the rest of the thing. No, we're gonna go. And of course, also then their resolution. How come no one ever talked about the Discovery and their spore drive? It's a forbidden subject. Nobody ever talked about it again. Oh yeah, that's gonna really silence the Klingons who saw this thing in action, and everybody else who saw this thing bopping around, in place. Yeah, that excuse doesn't hold water for a microsecond. That's part of the thing of why you cannot take this stuff seriously. But Strange New Worlds, they're forced into actually writing episodes, resolving them. So in that respect, yeah, the pretty low bar, but it was better performing than Discovery. But it's still got serious problems. It's clear nobody on that writing staff has any clue how things work on a military vessel. They don't follow orders, They're always talking back to the captain, and the captain making dinner for the crew every other week. It's like, no. That's not the way it works. And Ethan Peck is maybe a fine actor, but the way they're writing Spock, that's not Spock. It's barely a Vulcan. And you got crew members on there that do not belong on that ship. And Benga, he didn't show up until well into the second season, and the way McCoy introduced him, like he hadn't been around long. He sure as hell wasn't around back when Pike was on there. And they, Uhura, why? And of course, also blowing off. Where's Dr. Boyce? Where's Lieutenant Tyler? Where's the people we knew were on the show? All they got, the ones they brought over was Pike, Number One, and Spock. Now, I like Ortegas as a character, but at least to perform. But it's like no. It's like, what's your thing? My thing is you set a course and lay in a heading and carry out my orders, Lieutenant. Don't give me this. What's your thing? My thing is just lay in a course and head warp factor 2. That's another idiotic. Nobody else. Where did this come from? What's your phrase? Nobody do that shit. I think every one of them, had one point where the word was engage. Pike at the end of the cage, Kirk a few times, Picard obviously. But I think we'll take time now to talk about, Picard. It took him a while to convince Patrick Stewart to come in and do a Star Trek Picard series. He didn't want to. The story was told. He moved on, but they sold him an idea of of Picard is not the same guy he was before. And what we got for the first couple of seasons there was really Patrick Stewart just working through his issues. This was not Jean-Luc Picard we saw. This was Patrick Stewart waiting to die. Especially season 2, where he's dealing with his personal things about. Because Patrick Stewart lived, he was an abusive home. His dad came back from the war, horribly PTSD'd, and was very abusive to his mom. His mom didn't commit suicide. In fact, she lived well into the, I think she into the 1990s. So she was around when Patrick had, come fame and fortune as Jean-Luc Picard. But Patrick Stewart has a lot of issues, and he dealt with that. And he used Jean-Luc Picard as sort of a way to vent his own issues. Had nothing to do with Jean-Luc Picard, though. Jean-Luc Picard always didn't grow up in an abusive home. his father didn't approve of his entry in Starfleet, but it's like, forgotten. And I don't think there was any reference to his elder brother Robert or anything like that. It's like, there was, what the hell is this? But first season is supposed to be springing on from the episode Measure of a Man, and it was clear from the outset they never watched Measure of a Man. They never bothered to look into it. They just read the blurb on Netflix and off to races. No reference to it, no crediting to Melinda Snodgrass. And she was a little miffed at that one. It's like, can you at least, say hi? But it's clear they didn't, because the conclusion of Measure of Man would have made their little synth uprising impossible. Because you wouldn't have had a slave race of androids to do an uprising with. And also, something perplexing is like the guy who played Maddox in that episode is still around. He's teaching theater at UCLA. Did they ask him? No. They brought in somebody else and they killed him off. And it was just stupid. It was just wall-to-wall stupid, that thing. He's like, and Patrick Stewart's really not playing Jean-Luc Picard. Jerry Ryan is really not playing 709. It's just dumb. It's like, again, they're trying to turn into, kind of Star Wars-y type thing where they're running around a renegade ship, Some interesting ideas, but otherwise, like, no, I don't think so. It wasn't until season 3 when, by this point, by the time of season 3, Alex Kurtzman is busy setting up Starfleet Academy. Akiva Goldsman is running, Strange New Worlds. They brought in Terry Matalas to do kind of the very beginning and very ending of season 2 of Picard. The rest of it was all with those two guys. That's why it's crap. And let's see, the very beginning and very ending of Picard, of season 2, that's what Matalas was in charge of. I mean, he was kind of stuck with what they had, and so did what he could. But that's considered some of the two better segments of that. But it's still crap on a stick. But then Matalas gets handed season 3. On his own, they're doing other things. Just got a few things you can't violate. Picard's going to be an android body. Riker and Troy lost a kid and a few other things. But the rest of it, they let him get away with cold-blooded murder. Because he took the opportunity to undo as much as humanly possible with the previous two shows and a lot of outstanding stuff from previous Star Trek. Basically, this is the first time really we see Patrick Stewart playing Jean-Luc Picard. Previously, that was not Jean-Luc we saw. I don't know what the hell Patrick was doing, but that was not Jean-Luc Picard. Season 3, okay, there's Jean-Luc. That's the way Jean-Luc acts. That's his voice. And Riker, it's like, yeah, we get a little more of that fire back when we get him in there. And they're trying to pull a fast one to get the Titan to do things. And Jerry Ryan, Matalas spent a lot of time on Voyager. So he knew how to get Jerry. And Jerry, now that sounds more like 709. Yeah, she's relaxed her tone a little bit, but it's still very... Okay, that's 7. Here we go. And Todd Stashwick was a bit of a change of pace. Actually, someone who wasn't going to buy the bull. But when push came to shove, it's like, oh shit, red alert. He followed but but they also, and why he had a personal grudge against Picard, because he was a junior engineer on one of the ships at Wolf 359. So we had a little scene in the bar with that, and talking about with Jack Crusher and your old man setting the universe on fire, and like he lost friends, and and I'm blanking on the captain's name, but it's like by the end of the series we're loving this guy. Before he was the most hated character in Star Trek, by the end he's beloved. It's like, oh my god, don't kill him. but bring in the rest of the next gen. And what's the next gen? No, that's what we need. Okay, we need what they didn't give us with the Star Trek, with the Star Wars sequel series. All of the old crew back together again one last time. And once they finally got everyone back around that table, said this has been been too long since this. And they finally they got a way to found a way to have Brent Spiner play Data without having to deal with. He's obviously older. He can still play the character, but it's like, okay, we just change the body, change things around. And I like the way that we're saying again. The people, it's just fan service. Yeah, after the previous several years of abuse and neglect and derision from the people in charge, we earned that fan service. We earned every bit of that fan service. And the thing is, that's the difference when it's just meaningless member berries like Starbase Yorktown or naming an ice planet Delta Vega. That's, you're just pulling names off thing. But when it's stuff like, okay, when actually you're resolving long-standing issues, not the least of which was resurrecting the Enterprise D. Because that's one thing that kind of stuck with Metalis was the way this was not a dignified ending with Generations. So that was one of the things he set out to fix, because Enterprise, the Enterprise is not is unsalvageable. Well, within and again, I thought, well, wait, they declared unsalvageable. It can't be the Enterprise D coming up, so they had me fooled for a bit. But when it comes up, nope, there it is. Okay, all right, let's revise that. Not salvageable within the standards Starfleet had set up to get this ship back into service in a timely fashion. However, give Geordi about 20, 30 years, and just basically fixing the saucer and banging out the dents of whether, and you get another star drive section. In this case, the whatever happened to the USS Syracuse. Change the numbers, bingo. Enterprise D is back and ready to go. And good thing it was, because, and that one, a bit of a nod to Battlestar Galactica, where the Galactica only worked because it wasn't networked into every other thing in colonial society, so the Cylons couldn't hack it. In this case, the Enterprise D was not a part of this thing, so the Borg couldn't hack into it and do weird things. And again, and we get a story like, basically it's like, and this was deliberate. The old folks coming to the rescue of the younger generation that had been taken over by a social contagion. Now that personal fight with Indy and the whole trans thing, that hit home with me. Yes, this is very much what it is. Those old farts still got one big fight left in us, and this is it. So we got a happier ending for the Enterprise D, and also the revelation of Kirk on ice at Daystrom Station. I'm zapping bugs on the sideways here. That takes care of the bad taste of Kirk dying in Generations. Okay, he's not quite dead yet. And also, you need to look at third season of Picard as a 10-hour pilot for Star Trek Legacy, if that finally happens. And usually, and the word is, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We got to let a few things die off first, a few contracts expire, and then finally, okay, you still want to do Legacy, Jerry? Because Jerry Ryan has turned down a few things for 7 and 9 that weren't Legacy. That no, it's not. I'm do Legacy or I don't do it. And I think that one good, even if it's just a one season miniseries shot, I think one dangling storyline out there was, I think, basically a version of Shatner's story, The Return, where how Kirk comes back amongst the land of the living. And you just change a couple of things. Instead of the Romulans conspiring with the Borg, you just give it all Section 31. They got Borg technology. They can do the same damn thing. And they want to turn Kirk into a sleeper agent. And you have him come back doing havoc and whatever. And maybe even get Patrick Stewart one more time. Because he's up. He had so much fun last time. He's up for another one. You can bring back a few guys and have some of the same encounters. But there's also enough sets, like you could shoot some of this, because there's one point where Kirk retreats into a holodeck and recreates the original series bridge. You got one in Ticonderoga he's very familiar with. The Star Trek Continue sets in Sandusky are in the process of being rebuilt. It should be mostly done by now. If it's not up by now, they'll be up in a few days. So they're building everything back up there and laying it all out. So there are there's sets available, and of course they also got their own. I'm sure somewhere is the set for the Defiant Bridge. They could put that back up, and get that going. But there's things they could do, and do a very good job of bringing back doing Return of Kirk to the Land of the Living. And that carries another with the name Star Trek Legacy. You're not just doing 7 of 9 carrying on with the Enterprise G. You got Kirk coming back, and okay, well, maybe I can still be of use. That sort of thing. Yeah. But that's just me throwing a pitch out there. But that one, the petition to get Star Trek Legacy greenlit, it was bigger than the petition that got Strange New Worlds started. The only reason it hasn't happened is because of Alex Kurtzman. He has refused repeatedly to do Legacy. He's been asked by Ellison and the current Paramount to give us a pitch on Legacy. They won't do it. They won't even come up with a pitch to do Legacy. Paramount wants to do Star Trek Legacy. But again, it's going to have to wait until that contract is finally dead and buried and gone, and Kurtzman's off the lot. And they've been told to be off the lot by Christmas. That brings it to Starfleet Academy. First season is due to finally be released in January. They got greenlit for 2 seasons, but don't really. Again, the world has changed. In this case, it's still 10 episodes in, so we're talking a total of 20 episodes. The buzz is not good. Studio is not impressed by what they're seeing, especially for the amount of money they put out on this show. The trailers are being ratioed to hell and back. Strange New Worlds is going to wrap up with a sort of a half season in the 5th. It's like 5 seasons. Yeah, the 5th season is only 6 episodes. That's just to wrap things up. Now, in the midst of all this was a couple little jewels. Lower Decks, brought by Mike McMahon, who came over from Rick and Morty, and apparently he impressed Kurtzman with a pitch. It's like he wanted, and he pitched it as a sort of a workplace comedy thing, where he wanted to see about the guys lower down who make the, so when you push a button and a banana comes out, the guys who make that machinery work, and that kind of stuff. And Mike McMahon, his dog is named Riker. Okay. So clearly, and it made it clear that no, Mike McMahon, he's got a proven track record. It's an animated show, nobody cares, and he's forgotten more about Star Trek than Alex Kurtzman will ever know. So he got the green light to do that, and he snuck in there. And because of the subversive nature of the show, he's able to get away with a lot of stuff. Thankfully, he was not given. They didn't give him any notes. There are a few questions here and there, but otherwise, they were able to do whatever the hell they wanted on Lower Decks. And it was, just reference it. Yeah, but it's references done properly. It's references by people who know what the hell they're talking about. When they reference something, yes, they know this. They didn't just see a reference on Memory Alpha and pull a name out. They're actually putting context to it. And actually, apparently, the heavy reference stuff was at the insistence of the network, of CBS. It wasn't going to be that heavy. But it's like, okay, fine, we can do that. But it was also sending a message to the hardcore fans. Oh no, we understand you. We know what you want. This is the place to go. And a lot of old time fans. Yeah, okay, now we getting something. This is and it gets around a lot of stuff because it's supposed to be the best. No, not this level. This is the lower levels. This isn't the Enterprise. This isn't the Titan. These aren't the ships going out making first contact. These are the guys bringing up the rear, right in the restaurant guides and stuff. Making sure the names are spelled right in the travelers brochures. You don't have to be the best of the best of the best for that. I mean, in a way, it's kind of heartening because, okay, if you're not, another James Kirk, there's still a place for you in Starfleet. You can work on one of these ships, and you still got to go through the academy and be prepared for stuff when something happens. But it's also like, we know you're not going to handle things well, so we're going to put you in the back. Okay. You get the California class ship. It's still an important job, but you're not going to the Enterprise yet, Sporto. Okay. And they got, they did a lot of stuff, and they such love for the original animated series. You got Edoans back in there. You got the Kazinti. You the 40-foot the skeleton of 40-foot Spock from the Infinite Vulcan. Anything. When they're fighting with some race over wreckage of a Starfleet freighter. It's one from the animated series. Okay, so when Gary Mitchell came up as a reference, he wasn't in a Discovery uniform. He was in a pilot style uniform. So anytime they had the opportunity to refer to Discovery in that time, no, they didn't. It was strictly original canon. And we see other crews, they're wearing the standard gray shouldered, colored undershirt of the movie era. So, and the biggest, the only reason Lower Decks got canceled is because Alex Kurtzman pulled the plug on it. I think it's kind of a little petty little thing because they pulled the plug on Discovery. He pulled the plug on Lower Decks. We only get 5 seasons. You only get 5 seasons. So I think there was more than a little bit of thing when you're going to be that way about it. In the last episode of Lower Decks, and they're doing all that with the fluctuating timelines, we get a glimpse of a Klingon turning into a Discovery Klingon before the ship gets blown up. And that right there, he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. He knew what the way people would take it. He wasn't going to say one or the other because he wants to keep working. But he knew people were going to take it as what it is. It's at least a thread of, yes, Discovery's an alternate timeline. Because that's what it was going. It was showing alternate timeline stuff. So the fact you had a Discovery Klingon show up, alternate timeline. There we go. That's your way out. And with that alone, besides the fact, if you stuck with Lower Decks, there was 10 times more character development on any of those characters, even some background characters, than anything that happened on Discovery or even Strange New Worlds. We even got stuff about the conspiracy theory guy who claimed that Wolf 359 was an inside job. Even he got some development stuff, okay? But we learned a lot about Orion Society through Tendi and her having to deal with the fact she's nobility. And we finally got to why is someone like Beckett Mariner tolerated within Starfleet? Because the thing is, someone this obnoxious, and again, this very opposite of a Mary Sue. She'd been, deliberately busted to ensign. Whenever she gets promoted, it's like, we put a shock collar. No, bust me back now, please. So insulting fleet admirals to their face in order to get busted back to ensign. We finally got an explanation. She's PTSD'd out the wazoo because of, between Ensign Cito. Yeah, this is a throwback to the Next Generation episode, Lower Decks. Cito Jaxa, one of the cadets with the Wesley on the first duty, and gets assigned to the Enterprise, and then gets killed in a covert mission in the lead up to the Dominion War. Word gets back to she had the repeat years, so he had a couple of years at the Academy with with Mariner, and she idolized Cedo. So when Cedo got killed, it's like, holy shit. And then the war breaks out, and she's just, I don't, she still believes in the mission of Starfleet, but I want nothing to do with a position of authority where I'm in the position where I got to send somebody to their death. So there's tons of, and there's lots of stuff. There's stuff in there to dig and get into. And so that is, I have season 3 of Picard on Blu-ray, and I've got all 5 seasons of Lower Decks. Prodigy is another one that almost did it. It was doing well. It was really heavy on the Voyager stuff there, but a lot of what they had on their own there for a while. So they could get away with a lot. I finally got an explanation out of one of the writers of why their Tellarite character looked like a Talaxian. And he finds, well, look, it's just Tellarites on the young look like Talaxians. Okay, all right. And use example, not all humans look alike. So okay, fine, I'll buy that. Okay. And mainly because, not because it's logical, but because, look, they're doing good otherwise. I'll let this one slide. Okay, we'll just assume that when he gets older, he'll look more like a standard, Tellarite. I mean, he ran into, when they're crossed paths with Janeway, but there's a Tellarite. And he recognized it was a young Tellarite. So, okay, fine, I'll buy it. Where they lose it, though, is at the very end of season 2, they were forced to put in a reference to the Synth uprising on Mars, which is a Picard thing. And that is basically where you lose it. That is their season 8 of Game of Thrones. When that moment's, well, that's it. You just tied yourself in Discovery and Picard. You're out. So if you could somehow snip that bit out, then I would include Prodigy in the mix of only thing worth coming out of it. Otherwise, it's okay. You have season 3 of Picard, where it's mostly back in line. There's a couple of things with one good temporal anomaly to snap it back in a regular timeline, and then Lower Decks, which I think it was never in the Kurtzman timeline. This was always mainline Star Trek. And then most of Prodigy, but it's like they're not even streaming it anymore. They pulled it from the thing completely, which makes you wonder. So then the higher ups are not impressed with Academy. The word it's pretty much known between Kurtzman and they're not getting another contract. They apparently the studio side has worked up an offer, but the offer haven't been put out. So why even bother with these guys? And here we go. This is good stuff. All right. So, what is coming up? There is a push by Mike Sussman and Scott Bakula, something they're calling Star Trek United, which would take, account for the years have gone since Enterprise. Archer is now president of the new United Federation of Planets. And basically it's kind of a Star Trek The West Wing. Archer's he's got kids there. One of them's in Starfleet. One of them, there are a couple of, working on there. I think one of them's covert. You reflect a little bit of Scott Bakula's real life because there's grown kids. I put out, thing on my suggestions to Sussman. Hey, he's following me on X. I'll take the opportunity. Including, I think they would be great to just show Trip there, alive and well. Maybe as part of Archer's cabinet. The most you would say about anything about, I thought you were dead. Yeah, I got that a lot. That's all just never reference these other voyages as anything legitimate, But you got that, and Paramount has announced they are pursuing a new movie. The guys doing it are the same ones who did the last Dungeons and Dragons movie, Honor Among Thieves, which didn't do well at the box office, but that's mainly because the marketing sucked. But all the recounts, it was actually a good movie, and a few other things. So they're good, and they're from Tachyon Pulse podcast that they're talking about possibly merging United with the film thing, because Scott Howley apparently, or whatever, was wanting to do a Star Trek Origins thing, which, well, that's basically what Sussman's idea is, the birth of the Federation. The idea being that it would culminate with the launch of the original Enterprise, which and I think the plan is do a trilogy of movies. Where you got Archer, the very beginning, the founding of the Federation, after the Romulan War, and the machinations that go along with that, then culminating with the old Jonathan Archer. That's really the excuse I would go with of why there wasn't another Enterprise between the NX-01 and 1701 was, I figured they kept around the NX-01 as a training vessel. It's like the Constitution now, it's still on active duty. We can't use the name; it's still being used. So when they finally retired that to the Fleet Museum, and then now, the name's freed up now. This new Constitution class, this one, and we're naming this one the Enterprise. And the blurb on that screen in the Mirror Darkly, where they go through his bio, he was present at the launch of that Enterprise in 2245 and died shortly thereafter, because he was well over 100 by that point. But where we're going right now. They are planning pretty much a hard reset back to the original timeline, because the standing order is to whoever doing that movie is it needs to be strictly adherent to established canon. Except for Kurtzman Trek. Ignore that. All you want is totally gone. We're going back to the actual Star Trek timeline. I hate to use the term prime, because that was a JJ creation. He wanted to start calling it prime time. No. The way I see it, the prime timeline is what it was before the Kelvin broke off. But the prime timeline isn't any more than the original canon timeline. Because that's how you justify their Spock not knowing anything how to do a time warp. Whereas our Spock could do it in his head. But yeah, that's where we stand right now. So with that, we now wait to see what happens next. So we'll talk at you later.